Something bigger than the Super Bowl happened this week, and you might have missed it. Wilmore, Kentucky is home to a university that is still and currently, as of the recording of this video, experiencing some sort of revival. What started off as a normal Wednesday morning chapel now has people being bussed in from all over the country, gathering to witness for themselves this spiritual awakening. That means that this has been going on well over 100 hours at this point, and videos on Twitter and Instagram keep on pouring in. It is non-stop. Food and bedding has been brought in, and there is now being reports of the chapel being standing room only. I know what some of you might be thinking. Is this too good to be true? What does the Bible actually say about these things? And what happens next? All that and more is coming up right after this. This university was not expecting this to happen, but it is not the first time either. In a few moments, we're going to go directly into what they said, but do me a favor while you're here and hit the like button for me, as it helps out the channel to reach more people with content like this. And stick around to the very end to hear my one part that I really just can't stand behind when it comes to this stuff. So to start, let's just get right into it. And is this too good to be true? Well, let's start by defining what a revival is and what it isn't, because many people might think it's something like this, which it isn't. But there have been many great revivals throughout history led by awesome men and women of God, such as the Great Awakening back in 1734, giving us amazing preaching and writings from the likes of Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. Back then, it was estimated that almost 80% of American settlements personally heard Whitefield preach, making him America's first real celebrity. After that came the Second Great Awakening in the 1800s. The Businessmen Revival, or Great Prayer Meeting Revival in the 1850s, took the US and the world by storm, all from the spark of a lay missionary asking God, "Lord, what would you have me do?" and opening up a space at noon for businessmen to come and pray. At the start of the 1800s, William J. Seymour, an African-American pastor who was blind in one eye, went out to LA for a possible role in pastoral ministry. But after preaching his first sermon, he was kicked out and locked out of the building and began praying and meeting in a nearby home. This began tracking people from all walks of life, and an interracial crowd began to form around this pastor, and it kept growing and growing and growing. This was the start of the Pentecostal movement, and later the charismatic one. After that, we have Billy Graham post-World War II in the 1950s, and then back in the 1970s, wouldn't you know it, as the Jesus movement was taking root and calling for students to leave drugs, sex, and alcohol, and to pursue a personal relationship with Jesus, we see a familiar name. I share all that with you to show a picture of what revivals looked like in the past, and that there have been many claims of movements of them in the US. But does the Bible actually support these kinds of claims? Well, in its most basic and biblical sense, a revival is defined as a sovereign work of God in which he is doing among many Christians in one place what he is doing all the time in individual Christians everywhere. Meaning that God moves among a whole region of many churches and many Christians, and he has lifted them out of spiritual indifference and worldliness into a place where they are convicted of their sins, find a more earnest desire to seek out Jesus and his word, and boldly witness to the truth of God, all while seeing lots of people come to know him for the first time and having joyful worship, among other things. In these types of events, you just feel like God has really moved and done something that couldn't have been done by man. In the scriptures, we see this and examples of God's people crying out for this kind of revival in places like in Psalms 85:6, which says, "Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you?" Or Psalms 80:18, which says, "Give us life and we will call upon your name." These calls are also seen in the prophets of Isaiah and Habakkuk, but we see examples in the New Testament as well, examples of God's power and might falling on the people of God. Most notably, we all probably think of the Church of Acts. But maybe you're thinking that was just the start of the church. Of course it's going to have this huge boom. What about after that? We see shortly after Jesus' resurrection that there are a number of churches that have these kinds of ups and downs. Think of how Paul actually starts off each and every one of his letters and sometimes even ends with them. Most of his letters, there are prayers that are sandwiching in a bunch of other stuff there, that he first and foremost is starting out praying for these churches that God would bring revival to them. Don't believe me? Check out what he says here in Ephesians 3:16. He says, "I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your heart through faith." So pretty clear here, praying and asking God to bring new life or revival to a church, school, group of people, or individuals isn't an unbiblical thing. We should hope and want to see this happen. But let's get back to what is actually going on here. Now, maybe you're like me, and maybe your first thought is to be really skeptical. When I learned about these revivals back in Bible college, I definitely questioned some of them, especially those that fell under denominations that I had theological disagreements with. And just the reality that in this awesome free country we live in, anyone could call anything a revival. But is that what's happening here? Now, credit where credit is due. Just the length of time alone that these people have been gathering together to sing and worship is amazing. There doesn't seem to be an agenda, and there have been a ton of reports about people being saved. So why for some of us does this seemingly good thing put us on the defensive? Maybe for some of us, it's because we've seen people embellish experiences before. Like when they say you have to see this movie because it's life-changing, and then you see it and it's meh. Or that this dish or food is the best in the world and then they just overhype it. Or maybe for some of us because we've been in those rooms where the altar call is made and it feels a little forced. Maybe we've even tried it before and asked for the same things in our own lives and failed to see God move like that for us. Just a few of, I'm sure, a long list of reasons to be skeptical. Most of us don't know the full doctrine and theological stances of the university or the people driving this thing. But that's just it. In all my research so far and watching as things unveil, there doesn't seem to be a single person or group that is leading this thing. With every video I see, I just see people from all over gathering to pray, gathering to worship, gathering to sing to our King. So I have to ask myself and ask you, could this be the real thing? Could this actually be a God-led moment? And if so, could we let our hearts accept and rejoice in that? I know none of us want to look like a fool, and over time there might be skeptics and people who will come out and try to discredit all this. Maybe some of it might even be valid as more information comes out. There might be some who just come out and try to poke holes in it because it didn't fall within their denominational lines. Well, the good news is God isn't tied to a single denomination. And while orthodoxy and orthopraxy are both very important, God's word has the final say and authority on those matters. The one aspect out of this whole thing that I don't like and can't stand behind is people saying and pointing out how this wasn't an organized event, how minimal effort was put into it, and that there is no need for things like screens or lights or an organization. And I understand that at the heart of what some people might be trying to say is that yes, all and any of us can experience God's revival. That should be encouraging and uplifting for us. I totally agree with that sentiment. But what I don't agree with is people who will look at this and go, see, God works in the chaos and disorder over the prepared and ready. See, this stance goes to the extreme and also sees order and diligence as something that can get in the way of real, true revival, and holds up unpreparedness, unwillingness as this authentic, noble thing to be had. When these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. While yes, God can work wherever he pleases, God is also a God of order, and so we should be a people of order. Paul tells us so much so when it comes to our preparation and order of worship that all things should be done well and decently and in order. So that's going to do it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on it down below, and if we missed anything. Also, while I got you here, check out this video right over here where we talk about why you might be personally not experiencing a revival in your life. So I'll see you over there, but until next time, know that you are valued and loved. I'll see you soon.